Hey everyone. Um, so I guess this is my first video on this new channel. I have other channels and I have a Twitch channel that I probably won't put on this channel for quite some time, if at all. Uh, but I guess this is kind of a different thing for me personally, just because I'm used to dialogue. I usually have a Twitch chat to kind of reference to and have a conversation with, I guess, so to speak. And this time I'm kind of just speaking into a void or speaking into a vacuum, I guess. I'm not speaking to any one person directly, but it's more so just to the masses. um I guess the thing that I really wanted to talk about, and I guess my motivation, my inspiration for making this channel in general, is the topic of uh everything that's going on in the world. you know um I guess more specifically, employment, the economy. There are a lot of people out there that I can kind of see are very much kind of very susceptible, I guess, to the doom and gloom content, the doomer content that we see a lot on all these different social medias. I mean, especially YouTube and Instagram, I think is where I've seen the most. And I guess I want to kind of come on here with a different perspective. I don't know how many people are really going to take this perspective seriously, to be honest with you. Because I know that, like, a lot of things that I guess I have personally seen in the comment section, especially, is, being toxically positive, and that, you wouldn't understand because you're employed. And I guess if you haven't already read the title of this video, I am coming from the perspective of a person who is employed. um, I, I I I I am coming from that perspective, but I also want to say that I also understand where people, the majority of the people that are online and seeing all this doomer content about the economy and about jobs, disappearing and not being able to find an entry level job and whatnot, right? I guess I want to kind of come from a different perspective, a little bit more hopeful. I hope, I really do hope that this can inspire some people at least, or at least deter people from uh, being so doom and gloom and being so depressed. While they do have valid reasons, 100% they have valid reasons. I also want to kind of come from a different perspective, and I do want to kind of, I guess, put that theme of there is a light at the end of the tunnel, you know, and not everything is completely hopeless. I guess is the perspective I want to come from. Um, so I guess to kind of start off, I come from an Asian background, a half Asian background. I have family that comes from Hong Kong, and I guess if you don't know, one thing about Hong Kong is, it's one of the places with the highest standard of living. Uh, I mean, there's literally coffin homes exist for a reason. I mean, so like coffin homes, if you don't know, are basically just these small boxes that people like Hong Kongers they basically just live in while they're working, minimum wage jobs or something like that. They don't even have access to a kitchen or a bathroom that is, private or their own. It's very much communal. There's a lot of safety hazards there. But why do I bring this up? And the reason why I bring this up is because, from that perspective, and I have lived in Hong Kong there, and I've seen, my family is not wealthy by any means. But I have seen life in Hong Kong, and I have seen, how difficult it is there. But what I also saw was, you know, resiliency. And what I mean by that is, think about it, right? Yes, the living conditions and coffin homes and all that stuff, it fucking sucks. It's terrible. Nobody should be living in situations like this at all, right? But regardless, they're still living, right? To some extent. And what I mean by that is, they found a solution to, the absolute housing crisis that is happening over there right now, right? And that is effectively a coffin home. um, some people even made like official coffin home style units that aren't necessarily as hazardous as actual coffin homes, but are they're like these little, like, like space shuttle looking tubes or whatever sort of things. But okay, I'm on a bit of a tangent there. But regardless, that's the perspective, right? That yeah, they're resilient, right? They didn't just decide, you know what, nothing's worth it anymore. I'm not even gonna live anymore. Or I'm not gonna, I'm not even gonna bother trying to do this or do that to solve my situation. They ended up finding a solution to it, which was extreme. It's a radical solution, but it was a solution nonetheless, and that is coffin homes and renting those out and continue to work, right? Um, but regardless of that, that's the perspective that I guess I kind of take from, I come from a family that is very resilient. They've come from hard times. They're not extremely wealthy. They don't know Jeff Bezos personally. They didn't meet him in like a stall of, some bathroom stall in like 2001 or some shit like that, right? Like they're very humble. They're very much just average everyday people that you and I would probably come across, right? But regardless, they made success for themselves, right? They owned two homes. They owned, I should say, past tense. Of course, since my brother and I moved out after college and all that stuff, they decided they didn't need the space. um, they owned two homes at some point. My dad, my father, he's very hard worker. He's like, the VP for his company now, right? For that specific location slash branch. And my mom as well, having to coming from Soviet Ukraine, she has kind of, come and made a name for herself in the community. She does a lot of community outreach now, and she's made a name for herself, and people know her, and she knows people, and you know, it's something that probably would not have been possible uh, before, right? But regardless, they made a name for themselves, and that's the perspective that I guess I kind of come from. Is I come from that perspective of anything is possible, you know. Now I understand that there's a lot of differences. People say that there's a lot of differences between what was America before and what was America now, and I understand that. But at the same time, I think there's also this sort of like science to us where, we're always evolving. I mean, human beings have always evolved since the beginning of time. Um, both physically and I guess mentally with, all the blueprints that we've made for like things like cars and planes and, and whatnot, right? But I think that's the perspective that I kind of come from. And I guess I don't want to come on here and be like some sort of messiah and say to people that, everything is possible, or I guess anything is possible, and give them like a sort of blind uh, guidance, right? Because, a lot of people are saying that jobs are hard to get, right? It's very competitive, very, very competitive nowadays. And it is. I'm not gonna, I've seen people come on here and be like, "Oh, all you have to do is do this and do that and blah blah blah," right? Like it's so easy, right? That's not the perspective that I'm coming on here with at all, because I understand that, it isn't easy at all whatsoever. It's a very, I mean, the job market is so competitive nowadays. Um, that yeah, it's very difficult. But at the same time, you know, while it is difficult, it's not impossible. And I think that's the kind of perspective that I see from a lot of people, is that, the job market is impossible right now. It's not impossible. It's just become a lot more competitive. And I think the perspective that people should have going into the job market and going into that is, you know, what is in my control? You know, I don't want to put it into, I don't want to word it or phrase it. I've seen this before. I don't want to word it or phrase it as like, what can I do better or what can I improve on? Because, there are some people um, that are out there that are very much, they have the credibilities, right? They have the degrees, they have the skills, right? But for whatever reason, that person, I don't know, like Jennifer in HR is just not giving them that, that opportunity, right? Um, or they have an AI that just whatever, maybe completely rejects the resume or something like that, right? Um, I and I do want to kind of put it out there that I've been in that similar situation, right? During my senior year of college, I mean, I sent over well over 100 applications. I think it was closer to 200 by the end of it, I would say. And it's definitely not as crazy as people, other people saying that they've submitted, 1,000, a million, whatever, right? But it's still a lot, right? Sending in a bunch of applications like that, especially in the span of just a couple of months, it does take a toll on you mentally. And on top of that, I've had two offers rescinded from me. One of which was a friend of mine that referred me, and that still got rejected or rescinded, I guess. you know. So look, anything, nothing is sure in life. Yeah, I guess is the perspective that I'm coming from, right? So that's why I kind of want to come on here and say, look, do your best. Do the best that you possibly can. If you are disadvantaged, right? Like I was, I didn't come from a wealthy family. I lived in Section 8 housing for a majority of my life. You know, um, my parents ended up making a name for themselves and ended up doing well for themselves, right? And then I ended up doing well for myself over time. I think the perspective that we should have is, resiliency, and that nothing is sure in life, but not only is it not sure, nothing is sure in life, but also that, even if nothing is sure in life, right? It does not hurt trying hard, right? It does not hurt you to try the best that you possibly can, right? And let's take it from the perspective of like a software engineer, right? I know that a lot of people out right now are saying that software engineering market is completely cooked, right? The tech market is completely cooked. Claude AI can do this, Claude AI can do that, ChatGPT can do this and that and whatever, right? And while there is some truth to it, you know, I think despite what the news says, no one will ever be able to replace humans, not even robots. Okay. And this is my perspective. And the reason why is because, you know, humans are unique in the fact that we don't even understand ourselves, but we have, these things that we simply call emotions. And we have these things that are simply just called mindset, right? Resiliency or whatnot, right? And being proactive or always kind of like busying ourselves to some extent, right? No one tells us what to do, most of the time. I would have to assume most of us are kind of working on our own volition, right? We're doing our own thing. You compare that to ChatGPT or Claude AI, we have to we have to do what, prompt engineering, right? We have to tell Claude AI what to do or tell ChatGPT what to do, right? Um, and I think that's something that is always going to have human oversight. So yes, while something like the tech market, for example, is extremely, extremely difficult to get a job in, it's not always going to be like that. There's always there is a light at the end of the tunnel, right? Because at some point the company's going to realize, holy shit, we just fired 50% of our workforce, but wait a minute, Claude AI or ChatGPT can't do this, right? There's no creativity, there's no emotion, right? Um, there's no human intuition, right? That's another thing that I think AI in general just doesn't know that well, which is human intuition, right? Gut feeling, right? I mean, we always, I think we've had in one way or another, we've had that sort of situation or that one time where you know, logic wasn't really the reason why we did an action, right? It was human intuition. It was emotion, whatever, right? That's what compelled us to do whatever we ended up doing, right? Um, and I think that's going to be irreplaceable, you know. But at the same time, if we are talking about simply just technical skills, yeah, AI is definitely doing better than us in that regard to some extent, but it still makes mistakes. Um, and like everything, nothing is perfect, right? Not even us, not even humans. but I think having that human interaction and having that human element to it is never going to go away, right? The pursuit of learning something, right? Always learning, always doing something. I think that is something that um, everything that's going on in the economy and in the job market right now will just never take away from us. Which is why I want to come on here and just kind of say, to people, I want to put it out there that um, it is possible. You know, whatever you want to work towards, it is possible. If it's learning a different language, right? Even if it's like, oh, Claude already knows this, it doesn't matter, right? If you want to learn it, right? Forget ChatGPT, forget Claude, learn the coding language, right? Read the documentation. Read the documentation. Um, I think that's kind of the perspective that I take, really. And yes, I understand. I am one of the few people in the class of 25 that are employed, or the Gen Z, I guess, just in general, right? Like I have friends that are still out of jobs. My girlfriend has been out of a full-time job in probably in what, close to 2 years at this point. You know, um, but she's still learning. She's still doing something, right? She has a part-time job now, which isn't, of course, it's something that she doesn't want to be doing all the, for the rest of her life, right? But she's going into law, right? She was in advertising. She did advertising for a little bit, um, but that didn't end up working out. So she ended up deciding, I'm going to go into law, and so that's what she did. She's studying for LSAT now, right? Will she make it into her dream law school? She doesn't know. Nobody knows, right? I don't know. I would want her to, of course. I'm always rooting for her. My point being is, if we always have this sort of mindset, right? That this is something that I'm trying to, I guess, deter people from. I understand that there is frustration in the current job market, and there's just frustration in employment opportunities in general, right? But if we always have that mindset of like, oh, it's everything that's happening right now is a complete external factor and I can never change it and I will just sulk for the rest of my life. Um, you know, that kind of begs the question. I guess I asked, you, the viewer, it begs the question, what is the point to life for you? Right? And I don't mean to say this as like, oh, if there's no point to life to you for you, then just forget about it, right? Then don't live life anymore, right? That's not what I'm saying at all. I want you to live your life, right? But it's more so comes down to, what is your purpose? What do you want to do in life? What do you want to achieve? Right? I'll give you some perspective from me, right? I currently am employed, yes, but I'm still in the job market, right? My current job opportunity, right, is great. I love my coworkers. I love my manager. They're very chill. They're very cool. But it's not something that I want to do for the rest of my life, right? I want to go into a different industry, right? I want to increase my total compensation as much as possible. As greedy as that sounds, I know some people are like, oh, like, well, you want more money? Like, six figures not enough for you? Um, but the reason why is because I have a couple of purposes, right? My first purpose is, I want to build myself a life, a family at some point. I'm only 22, so I understand that this is a bit of an early, I guess, bit of an early perspective for me. But I'm only 22, and but I'm still thinking about my future, right? Like I want to achieve something, right? Whether it be materialistic or not, I want to achieve something. I have dream cars that I want to buy. I have I have homes that I want to buy. I want to be closer with my family. I want to move them up north back again, and you know buy a house in my hometown where we were completely priced out, and say, hey guys, look, here's your home. I want to give the keys to a home to my mom and dad, right? Like that's the perspective that I come from, right? As corny as it sounds, it's completely fucking corny. I understand. But as corny as that sounds, that is still a goal for me, right? It's just something that I want to achieve. And I don't think that that's a bad thing whatsoever. And that is my motivation for doing the things that I'm doing, right? Um, I do it for family, I do it for my girlfriend, I do it for myself as well, right? What do I want to achieve? What do I want to buy? What do I want to get? You know? So in these moments, I guess you kind of have to be a little bit selfish, but also look within. Why are you doing the things that you're doing? Why aren't you doing the things that you aren't doing? Right? Like, why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? And I don't want to come on here and place blame on anyone. There is no, it's not a blame game whatsoever, right? I'm not blaming you or the doom content creators or anything like that, doomer content creators or anything like that, right? I'm not blaming social media. I'm not blaming the billionaires. Like, I know there's a bunch of different perspectives that people have, and all of them are valid. But I also want to propose the question to you of, what is important to you and what do you want to achieve in life, and how do you want to do it, right? And if you do have something, right? If you have something in mind, understand that it takes time. I think that's something that we're all kind of forgetting in our lives now. And I understand that, it's look, man, life is hard. Um, everything is moving so quick. I mean, it feels like every other day we're hearing about some new Claude Opus, model, new model, new ChatGPT model, new war happening, right? Like there's so many things going on, right? But I think if you just kind of take a step back and reflect and think, what is within my control right now? What is within my control right now? I think that's a very important perspective, very important question. And I think that's something that we can all kind of um, ask ourselves, you know. So, regardless, I think that's something that I wanted. I didn't want to be the voice of reason, or be like give you guys the answer to all of your struggles and all of your woes. I'm not here to, yeah, like I said, I'm only 22. Um, I don't know everything. I really don't. And I'm not going to come on here and say that I do. But I also want to kind of give some people hope that, things are possible. Like, what you want to do, what you want to achieve in life is possible. It kind of starts just from within for a little bit, right? Like it does kind of start from the perspective of, what can I achieve? What do I want to achieve? And just creating a roadmap from there. I think that's kind of the perspective that I really take, honestly speaking. Um, and yeah, so I just I guess I don't know if this is going to be like the only video that I will ever have about a situation like this. I know that this topic is extremely hot right now. I mean, there are multiple YouTube videos that are just talking about this alone. And I understand, I understand the perspective. I understand that, people are struggling. Um, and I just want to kind of come on here and say, look, other people are struggling as well, right? And even though I'm employed, I'm also struggling. All right, I have insecurities of myself, and my technical ability, my technical skills. I'm like, the industry and the thing that I want to go into, right, for my next job, is extremely difficult to get into. It's there's a high bar. There is, I'd be basically complete. I'm basically competing against PhDs, borderline. Um, but I think, as long as it's fulfilling to me, and as long as I have attempted, right, and I have put, my 100% absolute uh, time and effort into it, um, there are going to be multiple chances, right? I'm 22. I'm sure a majority of people that may see this video, or a majority of people who have seen the other videos complaining about the job market, or even the people themselves that have made videos about complaining about the job market. Um, you're young, you are. If you were maybe around 50 years old, I think that's a different conversation to have. Um, but if you're in your 20s, if you're in your early 20s, or you're just about to hit your 20s, right? You're still in college. um, do the best you can, I think is the major it's really the major theme, the major phrase that I want you guys to get out of it. You know, just don't give up. And I understand that it's very cliche me saying this, right? And I'm sure there's going to be comments, down below that will probably say like, shut up. You're coming from a perspective of, you're employed, you have a job, you have money, right? Um, and yes, it's true, but at the same time, it's not as easy as people would think. You know, it took me a very long time, and it took a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety attacks to get through it, and I still struggle with some things. You know, questioning my technical ability and whether or not I'm going to make it. Whether or not I'm going to achieve things, right? So maybe I'm a little bit further down the road, but we're still neighbors. You know, um, regardless, and we should all be here for each other. I think, instead of putting each other down and saying that nothing is possible and all that stuff, I think it would be helpful if we kind of helped people um, a little bit more. So, anyways, that's my perspective. That's my sort of rant, I don't know, yapping session that I wanted to put out there. Do what you want to do, find a purpose. More to come, I guess, on this channel. As it's not just going to be over, it's not just going to be voiceovers over video games. I might even do more technical stuff. I have a lot in the pipeline that I'm kind of doing myself that I want to work on. But be there for each other, and also comment down below. If even if you do really want to complain about the job market, go right ahead. I'm not going to pit that against you. Because yes, the job market does suck objectively. Um, but instead of just kind of reaching out into the void and just expressing your frustrations and everything like that, reach for help. There are people out on the internet that will help. 100%, right? We're all a community to some extent. So, all right. I'm gonna stop being so cliche and cringe, but appreciate you guys listening if you've made it this far, and good luck out there. So see you guys soon, hopefully.